Thanks for joining us on the programme. So why has this piece of legislation been deemed necessary?
Well, it's not necessary, and I'm not sure why the Georgian government is trying to pass this piece of legislation. There is a tremendous amount of resentment in the Georgian government towards civil society organizations that act as watchdogs. And because Georgia is a kind of a de facto one-party system, albeit one where the ruling party has gotten in power by winning elections that are generally deemed free and fair, the civil society acts as a very important check on the government. So my suspicion here is the government wants to eliminate that check, and they've clearly overplayed their hand here.
Some may say the US has cracked down on some foreign media companies before, so what's the difference?
Well, that is true. And the Georgian government has said that this is the same as the FARA, which is the Foreign Agent Registration Act in the United States. The difference is that in the United States and in many countries in the West, there are two parties and there are checks on government power. And in Georgia, civil society is the only real check. And to be very frank about it, without foreign assistance, these civil society organizations and foreign media organizations would not be able to sustain themselves. But the law doesn't just require them to declare where their funding is from, right? Which you would have to do here. Your station probably has to declare that it's being funded by Turkey, right? For example. But they would have to declare themselves as foreign agents and would confront more surveillance on them as Georgian citizens. These are not people who are coming in as Americans, although there are some of that, and working there. These are Georgians. And that's why it's different than what we have here.
How likely do you think the protesters will be able to stop this legislation, given that it's already gone past its first stage?
Very unlikely to stop it. Now, the president has vetoed this legislation. She said she will veto this legislation. But to override a presidential veto, you need a simple majority, which means that a presidential veto, while symbolically important, is only a symbol. So this legislation is very likely to pass. The only way it wouldn't is if somehow the demonstrations are so massive that the Georgian government thinks that it is smarter to just rescind the legislation than to keep trying to violently suppress these demonstrations. And that would be the smarter move.
So what is the best outcome then if this legislation gets passed? How will companies and other non-government organizations deal with this new law?
Well, the first thing we have to ask here is, if this legislation passes, is the Georgian regime in crisis? And my sense is yes. Now, you can look at that footage that you're showing, and these are very large demonstrations. There you've seen American flag, you've seen European Union flags, you've seen Ukrainian flags. But this, very importantly, is not being led by any political party. In the past, while the Georgian Dream, the governing party in Georgia, has been in power, the demonstrations have been led by the United National Movement, the second party, but the United National Movement is very unpopular. So they've been able to say, if you support these demonstrations, you must be with this very unpopular political party. But this is led by civil society, and these demonstrations aren't likely to go away. So the first question is, what happens with the Georgian government? How do they respond to this? If this legislation is passed and non-governmental organizations and media organizations are forced to comply with this legislation, they will register, they will be called by the government foreign agents, and they will be under surveillance. It will be much more difficult for them to operate, which means that on the ground, Georgia will become a less free society and a less democratic society, and that will move Georgia away from the goals, not just of the Georgian people, but that this government has said are their goals: becoming part of the European Union, becoming part of NATO.
OK, for now, Lincoln Mitchell, Associate Professor of Political Science at Columbia University. Thank you.